And double did some Peter Principles, and obviously chapters 9, 10, and 11 of the Peter Principles coming your way at WNST.net this week. So, been a little while since I've checked in with Chris Pica, and, since then, Colin Kaepernick was going to be a Raven, wasn't going to be a Raven. I think the last time we talked, the Orioles were going to be sellers and not buyers, and they weren't going to be in the pennant race, and Joe Flacco was healthy the last time we talked, Chris. So, the only thing I can tell you that's still the same as the last time, we still hate the Redskins, and they're coming to town, so that's, we'll hate on them a little bit this week. But other than that, the world's upside down, man.
Well, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. I mean, I had the Orioles as sellers, and I think I went on record as saying I thought they should go ahead and get rid of some of the pieces and try to build for 18 and 19. But they've gotten themselves back in a position with Zach Britton healthy again. Guys are starting to hit. Manny's starting to hit. Tim Beckham was a piece I don't think anyone expected to contribute in the way he has. Starting out with the Orioles, so they put themselves in a position where now they're in the fight for the wild card against the American League, as I said a couple weeks ago, is not very good outside of the division leaders, and they've got an opportunity over the last 50-plus games to get something done and make the playoffs again.
It's just sitting there, right? I mean, look, I was the biggest advocate of sell-off. I don't think they can win the World Series. I think they can keep this interesting for the next 6 weeks. If they're pitching looks more like it's looked the last 10 days and a lot less like it looked the first 90 days of the season, then, certainly if Bundy looks like Bundy and Hellickson's going to come in and show the good Hellickson, and, I mean, there's a guy there that got dealt out of hell into a pennant race that he can help pitch the team into. So, I'll check off on all of this except what happens when Machado leaves, what happens to Buck and Dan next year. And I know, most fans aren't getting paid to make those decisions, but I sit here on the radio plotting this thing over 25 years and writing books and chapters about what went wrong with Albert Bell and what went wrong with Mike Messina. I am still very worried about them because of the guy who owns the team. But, if he was trying to buy interest for the next 6 weeks, it feels like they've done that.
Yeah, they have. And again, it tells you how baseball is such a long season. They looked like world beaters in the first, 41 games, 30-11. Best record in baseball to that point. Then the pitching just went completely south. Britton gets hurt. And they look like the worst team in the American League for a space of probably 50 or 60 games. And now they turn around here in over the last few weeks. And if you'd have told me that the pitching rotation would still feature Ubaldo Jimenez at this point in the year and not Chris Tillman, although at that point he had still been struggling, that the decision was basically one for the other, I would have believed you a month ago at that point, but that's the way it's turned out. They've got Tillman in the bullpen. Jimenez has given them some decent starts. Hellickson's been a nice piece. And this is a very typical Buck Showalter team. This is a team that's going to scrap because they've got those role players that do that, like Tim Beckham, and they're going to be in the hunt. And this is, Bud Selig's greatest legacy is the wild card because you've got 7 or 8 teams fighting for 2 spots, and it's going to keep interest and fan interest and media interest going well into September as to who's going to make the playoffs.
He is Chris Pica. He is Blog and Tackle out on Twitter, the communications director for the Bahamas Bowl, as well as the pro football writers who all got together over the weekend. I've had Clark Judge on this week and Ron Borges, some other guys that you're very familiar with in the Hall of Fame voting. That was a fun weekend. I think the speeches are going a little long, and obviously Ray Lewis has interjected himself into the news on the Kaepernick thing, and we're all going to be going out there to see Ray Lewis next year as well. Football season, it's complicated everywhere, including Miami, right?
Very complicated, and I will say this. If the Hall of Fame thought the speeches were long last year, I put this on Twitter, they might want to set aside an hour for Ray next year when he goes in. I don't. Well,
he's going to preach for 30 and thank for 30 and cry for 15, probably, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a church service for about an hour in Canton. It'll be interesting, but anyway.
Reverend Ray.
Yes, to Miami.
And Chris, whatever you do, just shut up about things, all right? I mean, you keep all your thoughts to yourself, and, we don't talk around here now, come on now. Shut up, Chris. I mean, come on.
Oh, that's going to be interesting. If they've got a full field of 7 next year at the Hall of Fame, they might need 10 hours for that.
I'll tell you what, that was one of the low points, in a career that had a lot of high points and some off-the-field issues, as you know, down in Atlanta. That video last week, be a lot of people that aren't going to forget that. Ray Lewis telling people of color and of substance and of shut up, just sit down and shut up. Wow. I'm sort of blown away by that, Chris.
I was too, and for a lot of different reasons. Again, I don't live in that world. I didn't play professional sports. I don't have Ray's background and where he grew up and what he saw. But you still do have Ray's still a very mesmerizing figure in Baltimore with fans and obviously with ownership who talked to him about Kaepernick. So obviously his opinion matters to some in the Ravens organization still. It still matters to some fans. He's sort of, I don't want to say it in this way, but I guess you want to say to this generation, he's Johnny Unitas. For Ravens fans who didn't know anything about the Colts, okay, and how much
he built the franchise. I'm eternally grateful that Ray Lewis showed up here, changed the course of my life and my career. I was around him every day for 15, 20 years, but I thought that video last week was not in anybody's best interest.
Well, that's what I mean. He cast that kind of that sort of aura around the franchise like Unitas did with the Colts. So with that comes a good bit of responsibility. Okay, especially when you're talking about somebody that your franchise may pick up. You may want to kind of consider your words a little bit more, and I don't. It was a little,
but there was no need for
it. The Ray Lewis we were used to hearing about, even just after he retired, where he was talking about a lot of different things that he dealt with during his NFL days.
Well, socially, nobody's been through worse than him. The incarceration. He lives with the orange jumpsuit picture, and so does Steve Bisciotti every time Colin Kaepernick comes around, right? And the Ravens had their turn with Kaepernick. And Chris, you know where I've been on this. You followed me on social media. I'm very open-minded about Colin Kaepernick. I have no problem with a protest. I think his protest in particular has been the worst communicated, and you're in the communications business, and he's not. He's a football player. But if he wanted to communicate his message, there's a million different ways to do that and to continue to do that and to be doing that. Even the Baltimore fans, as he was trying to recruit himself back into Baltimore, the one thing you can't have doing is your big mouth girlfriend shooting off slave driver references to Steve Bisciotti. That's not going to play. And I really do think that he had an opportunity here. I really do. And even if the door was kind of half shut to say, well, let's see how Mallett does and let's see if Flacco's back gets better, and August 25th maybe we'll make that decision. But it wasn't a decision the Ravens had to make last week like, let's say, the Dolphins had to make over the weekend.
Well, and I said this when we talked the last time about this, was that the Ravens should not even been talking about Kaepernick at all, quite simply, to me. I think you leave that alone until you decide one way or the other. If you're going to bring him on the team, then you talk about it then. I say this a lot, and I continue to say it, NFL owners are risk-averse. Steve Bisciotti, by his comments during the fan day, I think, proved that, saying, hey, this is a tough decision. I don't know if this guy can win games, and some of the things that he said there. And then you get his Kaepernick's girlfriend putting out that kind of picture with Ray and Steve Bisciotti. Ownership doesn't want to deal with that, okay? They don't. And most of those guys that own teams like that don't want to have anything damaging their brand or their logo. And I'm sure that the passion on both sides of whether you think, whether you're for Kaepernick or against him, a lot of owners decide he's not good for their business. And you don't want to give an owner a reason to shut the door. But she certainly did in that case. And it's like, well, do we want to put up with this sort of distraction because he's going to get asked about it if he's on the roster? Hey, he said this about your owner, about Ray Lewis. I think for the most part, I think that pretty much, I wouldn't say completely shut the door because it'll still be a football decision. But if the vote's a tie and the owner's breaking the tie, I think I know which way the owner's going to vote.
He is Chris Pike of Blog and Tackle, and on the front of your Twitter, I see that little NFL shield on the Super Bowl field there from back in February in Houston, and it's red, white, and blue, Chris, right? America kind of sticks to it. They take money from the government. They do flyovers. They do the national anthem. By and large, they vote Republican, and they, Bob Kraft and Donald Trump have been, and as well as Tom Brady and Donald Trump, as well as Ray Lewis and Jim Brown and Donald Donald Trump have all been seen together and, cavorted together and made money together. And, with the Kaepernick thing, dude, this isn't going away. I mean, I see Spike Lee and a bunch of people getting together. They're going to go to the front doors of the NFL towers in 2 weeks. And, there's going to be hell to pay on this thing. So I don't think, as much as Ray Lewis would say, shut up, it'll go away, I don't think it's going to go away in our country right now. And that's just not a football statement or a sports statement or a political statement. I just think that's where we are right now. And I think the NFL being in the middle of this swirl of all of this and us going over to London and all the things that are going on here, this is going to wind up at the NFL's front door. As much as they are risk averse, they can't run from this, man. They can't.
They can't run from it, but it's going to take a very strong owner who is willing to kind of take the good and the bad with bringing Kaepernick on the roster to do that, or a very desperate owner that needs a quarterback and decides, you know what, we got to win games, and this guy's going to give us the best chance to win games. We thought we were going to be pretty good, and we just lost our quarterback for a significant amount of time. And desperation in the NFL breeds very strange bedfellows when it comes to players coming to your team. In situations where you're trying to help somebody, get over the hump. I mean,
well, look, the Ravens stood by Ray Rice. They've still stuck by Terrell Suggs. He'll come out of the tunnel next week, and everybody will be all, and it really is forgotten when you can go play, right? I mean, literally. I mean, Ray Lewis would be a greatest example of that.
Right, and if Kaepernick was in a Ravens uniform, I would think that most people, because fans are going to root for the laundry, are always going to defend the guy in their uniform, okay? They may not like what he did, but the minute, if that were to happen, if he slipped on a purple jersey, most of the fans in Baltimore, he wouldn't get booed at a Ravens home game because he's wearing, he's wearing their colors and he's representing their team.
Everybody in Philadelphia loves dogs, but they cheered for Michael Vick, right?
Right, exactly. And the minute Kaepernick's in a different uniform visiting the Ravens, then it probably would be the absolute reverse. So, it's a little bit hypocritical on a lot of levels, but the bottom line is, can Kaepernick help your team win? He's better than a lot of backup quarterbacks, but he has to fit your system. This is a guy who's how he plays may not fit a lot of teams in the league. It's sort of specialized what he does and how he plays, and so you have to take that into account too. But you don't need the other distractions to make your decision for you when you're trying to make a football decision and trying to win games when people's jobs are on the line.
Chris Pica joining us here. He is blog and tackle, the communications director for the Bahamas Bowl, as well as for the Pro Football Writers. Dude, we've been all over the place in this conversation, but the conversation really begins and ends with Flacco, because that's all that really matters around here, whether it was Kaepernick or, kneeling, standing, left, right, black, white, whatever your argument happens to be. Ravens aren't going to be very good if Joe Flacco's not upright, and they might still struggle if he is upright, keeping him upright. Running game in question, offensive line in question, tight ends in question, passing game in general in question, health of the quarterback in question. Whew, a lot of questions, man. I mean, this is one of the reasons a guy like Harbaugh wants to avoid hard knocks, right?
Yeah, because you don't necessarily want to have those discussions taking place on camera that you may have to talk about later, but it's fascinating television for those watching, but I don't think you necessarily want to be involved with it. It takes an organization that really embraces those cameras to do it. But boy, I'd like to be a fly in the wall in Miami when you decide, okay, Jay Cutler's your best option at quarterback, who's basically saying, hey, I'm not in that great of a shape, and my wife kind of convinced me to come back. This was a guy who was going to television, okay? He had already been slated to work in TV this year on NFL package, and now he's a quarterback again for who knows how long for the Dolphins, but he doesn't look that enthused to be there, at least.
Dude, he's never look enthused to be breathing, man. I mean, that is his. What did you think? You were going to get this new guy showing up in I mean, seriously, right? I mean, you're not. I mean, he is what he is, and I don't know why Adam Gase is putting his professional reputation on the line with this, but obviously he sees something that a lot of other folks don't see, and he worked with him in a room, every day. So, this is his one shot to be a head coach. I'll be shocked if it works, but if Jay Cutler comes back and wins 11 games in Miami, that would be a story now, wouldn't it?
That would definitely be a story. I mean, talking about the other names they talked to, I mean, I think Tebow's name was thrown out there a little bit. Tebow's trying to hit baseballs in the Mets organization right now. I mean, so there's not
Bob
a lot
Greasy was unavailable. I've seen Marino. Yep. He's gotten a little chunky. I guess,
and I worked TV some years with Brian Greasy. He's not available, okay? So the Greasy family.
Jay Fiedler's unavailable. I don't know. Babe Laufenberg. I mean, I don't know, dude, you know?
And that tells you the state of the quarterbacks that are available to teams right now who have problems, okay, that have an issue at quarterback or have an injury, like the Ravens do. And you're definitely holding your breath if you're in the building. You're going to go out there and coach up Ryan Mallett and get him ready for the season opener if that's the way it's going to be. But the options beyond that are not outside of Kaepernick. And maybe Robert Griffith. There's not a lot behind those two guys that would make you very optimistic that a quarterback like that could come in and win.
Well, dude, there's already 120 guys in camp
and get to the playoffs.
I mean, there's 120 guys in camp already. I mean,
right.
And, that really is the indictment of the whole Kaepernick thing, is that there's 120 guys in camp, and he's not one of them. Chris Pika joining us here. All right, last thing for you, because I know you've watched a lot of baseball here, and you've been to you spend every night at the ballpark that I haven't been to down there in Atlanta. You got some stuff you wanted to say about the Dodgers, because I know you watched them play. We've talked some baseball around. I've talked to the Dodgers this week because the Orioles are out in L.A. playing the Angels, and teams talking about different directions. For the Dodgers, for the Nationals, for the Astros, for these teams that are in some way on autopilot at this point, so much of it is about winning Game 1 like it was for the Cubs last year.
It is, and what kind of amazed me was the Dodgers really did need to add a lot of pieces to what they had. And they were in Atlanta for a 3-game series, and were probably the most impressive team I've seen all year. And wins, losses, obviously they're the best team in baseball record-wise, but just up and down the lineup, they are solid. Yasiel Puig is still a wild card, batting in the 8-hole for them. Still kind of jogs a little bit out in the outfield and kind of makes plays with his glove. He probably would. I think he'd like him to secure catches better than he does, but he still has power options. But he's hitting 8th in their lineup, and they go out and get Yu Darvish. Okay, they didn't really necessarily need that piece, but they felt like that having him would help them, especially in the playoffs, because now there's really nobody in their starting rotation right now that you can go around. Okay, you're gonna see 5 tough pitchers in a 5-game series, and see these guys a second time in a 7-game series. And with the way they're hitting the baseball, with Corey Seager, Yasmani Grandal, I mean they've got some power and pop in that lineup, and they're, like I said, they're the best team I've seen of the National League teams that I've seen come through Atlanta this year.
Chris, I hope you're enjoying the rest of your summer. I know you're making your way back to your homeland of Mount St. Joe and Loyola College. You're going to be in Baltimore for a little while. Good for you, man. Come home for a little bit. Get some crabs.
Looking forward to it, eating some crabs and having some fun and seeing some friends.
Put your feet in the Chesapeake Bay is what you should do.
There you go.
All right, man. Well, it's still there. Nasty at WNST.net. There's plenty of water around here this week. Everything's floating, including my teeth at this point. We need. It's helping the tomatoes and the corn, though. I'll tell you that, Chris. When you get up here, make sure you bring me some fresh peaches from Atlanta. You do that. Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear, even in Atlanta, where Chris listens sometimes. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning digitally at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Text Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here getting you ready each and every Thursday for weekends of football with the SSV on WNST. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and of course streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are going to London next month. If you want to hang out with us on the Saturday before the game, throw me an email, nasty@WNST.net. I'll be getting all that information out there. We're taking a bunch of people over to London with us. We're excited about it. I went over last month to sort of test it out, figure some stuff out. We got a great trip ahead. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.